I was standing by the lemonade table when she walked over in heels too high for a backyard barbecue. Aunt May had just asked if I'd seen Travis. I hadn't. But I lied and said he's around here somewhere. The lemon slices floated in the jug beside me. Ice clinked softly. It was almost peaceful. Then she showed up. Kendra, wearing a silk blouse 2 shades too pale for sunlight and heels that sank slightly into the lawn. She didn't wave. She didn't smile like a friend. She smiled like someone about to win a game only she knew she was playing. Travis wanted you to have this, she said, handing me a white envelope like it was a birthday card. I took it with both hands. It wasn't thick. It wasn't even sealed with any kind of drama. But my fingers felt cold holding it. Behind me, I could hear the hum of laughter, kids chasing bubbles, someone setting up the Bluetooth speaker to play soft country music. The smell of charcoal grilled corn and sunblock mingled like it always did during these backyard get-togethers, except this time, there was something sour under it all. I opened the envelope right there in front of the folding table covered in deviled eggs and styrofoam plates. 4 words stared back at me like teeth. Notice of dissolution of marriage. I didn't blink, didn't gasp, didn't drop it. I just folded it, carefully, and placed it flat against my palm like a waitress balancing something too hot to touch. Kendra tilted her head. Her earrings caught the sunlight. She was waiting for a reaction. Something messy, something to feed on. I gave her nothing. Instead, I looked down at the table. There was a single deviled egg left on a cracked paper plate. Sweat droplets from a glass of iced tea had formed a ring around it. Like a spotlight. I reached forward, adjusted the dish slightly, and said, "It's about to tip." That's when I felt them eyes. Not hers. Everyone else's. My cousin Erin pretending to scroll through her phone. My sister Claire holding a cup of soda like it was glued to her fingers. Uncle John frozen mid-bite of baked beans. 30 people had been invited to a family barbecue. And now 30 people had just watched the family wife get handed her walking papers. From the mistress. In heels. The envelope still in my hand felt heavier than it should. Or maybe my arms had finally registered what my brain refused to panic over. I didn't cry. Didn't scream. I just walked. Step by step past the fold-out chairs. Past the red and white checkered tablecloths. Past my niece's forgotten bubble wand and the birthday gift bag someone had reused from last year. I walked until I reached the edge of the yard where Travis stood by the grill beer and hand apron on. He didn't look surprised. Didn't look guilty. He just looked casual. Like he'd outsourced the dirty work, and now all he had to do was finish grilling hot dogs. "Kendra give it to you?" he asked, flipping something without looking up. "Yes," I said. "She said she'd do it nicely." I didn't answer. He finally looked up. His eyes were glassy from sun or beer or maybe boredom. "I figured it was better this way," he added. "Cleaner." My heart didn't beat faster, it beat quieter. As if it had stepped outside my chest and was watching this like a stranger. I walked past him. Past the smoke, the sizzle, the sharp bite of charcoal hitting meat. Near the plastic lawn chairs, one of them slightly sun-warped from last summer, I stopped. I dropped the envelope gently on the armrest. Flattened it with 2 fingers. And then I said calmly, clearly not looking at anyone, "Tell Travis this isn't over, it's just going quiet." Then I turned. And walked back toward the house. Each step felt like I was sewing a seam shut from the inside. The music had shifted, someone had queued up a playlist with old Dixie Chicks. The voices were lower now, conversations thinned. Even the kids had stopped running. My sister Claire caught my arm as I passed. "Amelia," she said, voice low. "Are you okay?" I looked at her. She was always the one who cried in movies, the one who asked waiters how their shift was going, the one who believed people meant well even when they clearly didn't. "I'm not okay," I said. Then I squeezed her wrist gently, just once. "I'm not broken either." Inside the house, the air was cooler. Someone had left a candle burning on the windowsill, something lemony artificial. I stepped into the downstairs bathroom and closed the door. Saturday on the edge of the tub and looked down at my hands. They were still clean. Still steady. I reached for a piece of toilet paper, dabbed at my face not for tears but for sweat. Then I looked up at myself in the mirror. Same hair, same woman, but the wife, she didn't live here anymore. Not really. If someone handed you that envelope in front of your entire family, would you smile or set the table on fire? You never notice the beginning of the end. It's too slow to hear. Like a refrigerator hum. Or the drip of a faucet when you're trying to sleep. I used to think people left with slammed doors, thrown rings declarations. But Travis didn't leave like that. He left like air escaping a tire. Quiet. Gradual. Not worth fixing until you're already late. It started if I had to pinpoint it with Thanksgiving. I'd baked his favorite sweet potato pie with extra cinnamon. The table was set. The candles were lit. I even used the fabric napkins, not the paper ones. I'd told my sister Claire he was just finishing up a late meeting. I even put his name on a place card. But as the turkey cooled and everyone started passing rolls around his empty chair, something inside me folded. Not snapped. Just creased. He didn't text, didn't call. When I finally reached him around 10 p.m., he said, "I thought I told you I'd be in Atlanta." He hadn't. I remember hanging up and staring at the untouched glass of wine I'd poured for him. The candle had burned down halfway. Later that night, as I gathered plates in the kitchen, I found one of his shirts draped over a dining chair. It smelled like perfume. Not mine. I held it up, sniffed again. Something floral and expensive. Not from the drugstore. When I asked him about it the next morning, he barely looked up from his coffee. "Client hug," he said. As if that explained everything. He kissed the top of my head without aiming, grabbed his briefcase, and left before the toast even popped from the toaster. By December, he'd stopped pretending. No firewood stacked, no outdoor lights hung. One night I asked if we were decorating the tree. He said, "Do we need to this year?" I turned to the wall where our wedding photo used to hang. It was gone. I stood there longer than I should have, looking at the pale rectangle where it used to be. The nail was still there like a ghost spine. No one said anything. Not even me. On my birthday, he left a note on the kitchen counter. "Let's talk later." No cake. No dinner reservation. Just 4 words in black ink under a grocery list. I read it while reheating leftover chili. Even the dog didn't bark when he came home anymore. She just looked up, then laid her head back down. The house was quiet in a way that wasn't peaceful. It was heavy. And then one Tuesday, Miles took me to the diner on 5th Street. The one with the red booths and jukebox that only played songs from before 1990. He didn't say why, just texted, "You need waffles and someone who won't lie to you." We sat across from each other while my coffee went cold. He let me talk. Didn't interrupt, didn't comfort, just let the silence stretch. I told him about the perfume. The missing photo. The way Travis's shoes had migrated from the bedroom to the garage like they were staging an escape. Finally, Miles said, "You're not losing him. You already did." He didn't say it cruelly, just plainly. Like telling someone the forecast rain's coming, better bring a coat. I stared down at my plate. The syrup was pooling. The butter had melted. Outside it had started to snow. Soft, thin flakes. Miles reached across the table and gently took the fork from my hand. "You're still trying to feed a ghost," he said. "Let him starve." I laughed. It surprised both of us. Then I wiped my eyes, not because I was crying, but because something inside me had fogged over and needed clearing. When we got back to the house, Travis's car was in the driveway. But the house was dark. I stepped into the kitchen. There was a faint hum, the refrigerator, maybe. Or the part of my mind still hoping he'd say something new. He didn't. He was upstairs in the study. Door cracked, light on. I needed a recipe, something simple. Roasted garlic green beans. I couldn't find my phone, so I grabbed his iPad from the kitchen drawer. The screen blinked awake. No password. I typed green beans roasted lemon zest into Safari. But it didn't load. The Wi-Fi was slow. So I switched to the mail app. Maybe I'd emailed it to myself before. That's when I saw it. A draft message. No subject. No recipient. Just a few lines: asset restructuring. She won't contest. I'll handle. It wasn't a business email, it was about me. About our house. Our life. My hand went still on the screen. He hadn't even deleted the draft. Maybe he wanted me to see it, maybe he didn't care. Downstairs, the dog barked once sharply. Then silence again. I didn't confront him. Not that night. Not yet. I closed the iPad. Placed it gently back in the drawer. Went upstairs, brushed my teeth, and crawled into a bed that was only half warmed. I stared at the ceiling and counted the seconds between his breaths. Like listening for signs of life in someone already slipping away. What hurts more, the things he said, or the things he slowly stopped saying? I didn't drive to Grandma's for advice. I just needed air that didn't smell like Travis's cologne. 2 hours south of Charlotte, the world turned quiet. The kind of quiet that didn't beg for explanation. Just pine trees, rain-stained asphalt, and the same old rocking chairs on the porch since I was a teenager. I pulled in without calling. She was already on the steps. Didn't ask why I came. Just handed me a towel for the rain and poured me a cup of tea like I'd been expected since sunrise. I still put a little lemon in yours, she said, settling into her creaky chair. Hope you haven't turned fancy on me. I shook my head. The purse strap cut into my shoulder. The envelope inside it felt heavier than when it was handed to me days ago. We didn't mention it. She didn't ask why I looked like I hadn't slept, or why my nails were chipped, or why the tan line where my wedding ring used to be looked so raw. Instead, she rocked and watched the wind blow through the soaked peonies in her garden. Then, just when I thought we might actually keep it light, she said Travis always liked things quiet. You were the quietest thing he could get. I froze. The steam from the cup fogged my glasses slightly. I took them off and wiped them clean. Like that would help me see the next part of my life any clearer. He thinks you're too polite to fight, she added, still not looking at me. So prove him right, until you don't. That line hung in the air longer than the sound of the chimes. I stayed overnight in my old room. The same floral wallpaper. Same bookshelf I'd stacked with summer reads. But the bed didn't feel like mine anymore. I was somewhere between being someone's wife and no one at all. I didn't cry. I don't remember crying since the BBQ. Instead, I reached into my purse and took out the envelope again. Just to hold it. It had been opened. It had been read. But I couldn't throw it away. It wasn't rage I felt anymore. It was data. The next morning, Grandma made eggs with cheese like she always did. I ate in silence. Then we sat in that same porch again, second cups in hand, and she told me something I'd never heard. 1,974. Your grandfather drained my savings to pay off a woman's mortgage. Said it was a business debt. I looked at her. She didn't blink. He came home expecting a fight. I gave him toast instead. And a list of the accounts he didn't know I had. You stayed, I rebuilt. Quietly. With my name on every brick. There was no anger in her voice. Only calm, only steel. Sometimes she said clarity is better than closure. It didn't hit until that night. Back in my car. Parked outside my driveway. I pulled out my phone and checked the joint accounts again. Same numbers. Nothing strange. But something made me log into the bank's full client dashboard. There it was. An account under my name. With deposits I'd never made. Timestamps that matched Travis's late nights. I didn't sleep. I just stared at the numbers until my eyes burned. By dawn, I texted Miles. Me need quiet help. No questions. He didn't reply right away. But by 9 a.m. he sent back a name. Lena. She's discreet, tell her I sent you. 3 days later, I sat in Lena's office. She was in her late 40s, hair pinned neatly, no wedding ring. Her desk was clean, but there was a file already waiting for me. Miles had told her enough to begin. You're not the first, she said not unkindly. But I hope you'll be the last to stay quiet. We reviewed everything. The transfers. The shell company names. A secondary credit card I'd never used issued under my maiden name but attached to Travis's work email. I can trace the origin if you give me consent, Lena said. I nodded. By the following Monday, she handed me a report with clipped edges and her initials on every page. Travis Richard Monroe had been moving funds from our primary joint income into a side account for nearly 11 months. The trail was masked with service charges, fake consulting fees, and occasional payments to a florist I'd never heard of. The final note, account flagged for possible marital asset redirection. Recommend protective filing. I went back home and stood in the kitchen for a full minute. The fridge hummed, the clock ticked. And I realized the wedding photo that once hung in the hallway was gone. No one said anything, no one asked. I picked up that envelope again. White. Lighter now. Lighter because it wasn't truth, it was bait. He wanted me to burn, but instead, I lit the path. He gave me the matches. All I had to do was strike. He was laughing in rooftop photos with her. Sunglasses. Cocktails. Caption, new chapter. She's so graceful about the split. And I let him. It wasn't grace, it was calculus. Every move he made was another square forward. And I was letting him think the board was his. Grandma used to say, let them dance on a rug they don't know you're about to pull. I could hear her voice in my head each time I clicked save as PDF. While Travis and Kendra flaunted matching outfits in Rooftop Lounge's number, He's All Mine Now, I was in a quiet corner of a local bank signing a trust agreement under my maiden name. Clean. Untouchable. Discreet. The woman across the desk didn't flinch when I said I want no mail sent to the house. I understand, she said softly. You're not the first. Every document I touched was deliberate. I didn't rush. Didn't flinch. The printer at home hummed steadily, tax records, property deeds, past communication from our joint financial advisor. I cataloged everything like an archivist of my own undoing. Then I found it. Tucked deep in our shared Dropbox. Lakeview property. Reinvestment contract. Travis was planning to sell our lake house. The one we bought on our 10th anniversary. The one with the blue tiles I picked out. The one with my name on the deed. He hadn't asked. Hadn't mentioned. Had already set the closing date. Kendra must have liked the ocean better. I emailed Mrs. Cortez that evening. She called back within an hour. Her voice, even over the phone, was composed like marble. If the house is jointly titled, we can initiate a freeze before the closing date. I'll prepare the motion tonight, I whispered. Thank you. You don't owe me gratitude, she said. You owe yourself peace. The next morning, I signed nothing. When Travis emailed asking if I could just quickly review this final separation form, I replied, I'll need more time. I'd prefer we keep this amicable. He didn't notice the shift, didn't hear the edge in the quiet. That same afternoon, Kendra posted another photo. She wore a red silk dress, smiling into the camera like she'd earned it. Dinner at Vista Sky. He's all mine now. Let her have him. I had something better. Control. Miles texted me a single word that evening, filed. And then an hour later delivered. It wasn't messy, it wasn't loud. Travis received a formal legal notice, certified and documented, informing him that all joint assets were now under court review. His name was no longer enough. The freeze included the lake house, the secondary account, and the business loan he'd tried to secure using my credit as collateral. I didn't see his reaction. I didn't need to. That night, I lay back on the silk sheets he never noticed I bought last year, said they felt too slippery. And I dreamed about champagne. The kind that sparkles. The kind he couldn't afford anymore. I walked into the ballroom alone. Navy silk. Simple earrings. No date on my arm. But my presence that didn't arrive quietly. The rooftop ballroom shimmered in amber light. String quartet, tall champagne flutes, white lilies on every table. This was Travis's kingdom once. where he'd toast clients, parade charm, call me the perfect wife. Tonight I wasn't his wife. I was the reminder. Guests turned politely. Some nodded, some smiled too long. Claire met my eye across the room. Her mouth tightened then softened. She said nothing. But she didn't look away. I made small talk. Accepted sparkling water. Ignored the corner where Travis was expected to arrive. They entered late. Travis wore the same confident smirk he'd rehearsed his whole career. Kendra clung to his side, her heels too thin for confidence, her dress shimmering just slightly more than it should have knocked her. People turned again, this time with a slower curiosity. The kind that says, we've heard, but let's see. Dinner passed in courses. My fork barely moved. A murmur passed down the table before dessert. Someone whispered something about how elegant I'd been through the separation. I smiled. They asked if I'd say a few words. Just a short thank you for the community, someone said. Of course. Always the graceful one. I stood slowly. Glass in one hand. The silver gift box in the other. Some of you know, I began, voice clear but low, that this year has been a transition. A few heads nodded. I won't take much of your time, but I do believe in gratitude. And closure. I turned to Travis. To you and Kendra. She stiffened. He smirked. I even got a little something for both of you. I handed them the box. Not wrapped. Just silver. Clean. Unassuming. They opened it together, first the envelope, then the printouts. Travis's eyes moved quickly, then slowly, then didn't move at all. Kendra read aloud, her voice catching. Frozen, joint assets, under court review. Another page. Unauthorized transfers. Beneficiary tracing. Retroactive disclosures filed. Another page. You, she said, breathless, you transferred everything. I tilted my head just slightly. Number you did. I just kept the receipts. A silence settled that was deeper than any music could fill. Someone's fork clinked against porcelain. Then nothing. No one clapped, no one moved, even the quartet had stopped mid-measure. I raised my glass again. To truth and timing. Then sat down. Was I cruel, or did I simply return the favor? A week later he knocked. No watch on his wrist. No car parked outside. No her. I saw him through the frosted glass. Disheveled. Paler than I remembered. Holding nothing but needing everything. I didn't open the door. He knocked again. Waited. Then walked away. He once told me, you'll regret not needing me. He was right. I didn't. The house was smaller. 2 bedrooms, soft light in the mornings. A bookshelf I built myself. Fresh basil by the window. No one raised their voice here. Not even the wind. Travis emailed 3 times that week. Subject please, subject, just the business. Subject 1 call. I deleted the thread without reading. Claire came by that Sunday. She stood on the same porch where he had. But she didn't knock like she was owed anything. Just stood, hands folded, eyes rimmed red. I should have said something. That day, the barbecue? I nodded. I was scared, she added. So was I said gently. And I still did it. She swallowed. I stepped back. I'm glad you came, I said. But I don't think we go backward. She nodded once. Didn't ask for more. The next weekend I stood before a small circle of women at the library's community hall. Some younger, some older. All tired in familiar ways. I shared my story not as a tragedy, but as a lesson. Sometimes I told them the thing that breaks you is just the thing that frees you. They didn't cry. They nodded. Later that night I poured a glass of water. Opened my kitchen drawer, pulled out the envelope, the original one. White, thin. Still sharp at the corners. I slid it into the fireplace. Watched it curl and disappear. No drama. No music. Just peace. He left me with papers. I left him with nothing. And nothing has never felt so full.